The movie opens with a shot of thunder rumbling and a smoky cloud engulfing a mountain. A lone figure drives out of the mountain across a metallic bridge from the Shandor Mining Corporation, carrying something in the seat of his car, and speeds into the desolate farm in the countryside as he lures a mysterious figure into his compound. The man activates an elaborate setup on his farm, but the power fails. The man then walks inside his house, hides the box in his hands, sits in waiting as the shadowy creature attacks and kills him instantly. The next scene cuts to a bustling city where we meet Callie and her two children, Phoebe and Trevor. Callie was struggling financially, and when evicted from their home, she moves her kids to a small town, Summerville in Oklahoma. Callie has inherited a farm from her estranged father, and upon arriving at the farm, she and the kids realized that the house was in a state of despair, and since she couldn't find the keys, Callie asks Phoebe to break into the house. As soon as they walk in, the family of three experience an earthquake, and Callie tells them to hide under the table, but the tremors only last a few minutes. After they settle in, a real estate agent comes to see Callie, and she had hoped to sign papers and sell the farm, but the agent tells her that nobody wants to buy it. With nowhere else to go, Callie, Phoebe, and Trevor had to stay in Somerville, and Trevor complains about having to spend a summer in Somerville, but he stops whining mid-sentence when he sees a young beautiful woman, Lucky, and she piques his interest. Trevor walks into the diner and applies for a job to get close to Lucky, and meanwhile, Callie tries to cheer up her introverted daughter Phoebe, saying that they might get to make a new friend. On Phoebe's first day at summer school, she notices that someone has responded to her chess move on a board set up there, and she makes her next move before leaving. When Callie drops Phoebe off at school, she meets Gary, the summer school teacher, and Phoebe quickly makes friends with a boy who calls himself Podcast because of his love for making podcasts. Phoebe gets tired of the movie Gary put on for the class and sneaks into his office, where she finds out that he's studying the earthquakes that have been shaking Somerville. Gary, impressed by Phoebe's interest and knowledge in science, talks to her about the earthquakes, which are unusual because they're not caused by the usual natural events like volcanic eruptions or shifting tectonic plates. He's puzzled about the cause of these daily tremors. After school, Podcast shows Phoebe about Somerville and is shocked to learn that she doesn't believe in ghosts. To try to change her mind, he takes her to the Sandor mines, and he tells her a spooky story about how the mines were shut down because miners started jumping into the shafts and ending their own lives. Podcast also shows her mysterious stone carvings that appeared out of nowhere in the mines, and while they were exploring the town's mysteries, Trevor discovers an old car in the garage back at the farm and decides to try to fix it up. That evening, Phoebe notices a chess piece has moved on its own, and she ends up playing chess with someone that she can't see. Then a device in her room starts to glow, guiding her to a hidden box under the floorboards. She brings the box to school, and Gary, full of excitement, tells her that it's actually a ghost trap. Phoebe, curious about its origins, learns from Gary, who shows her a video of the Ghostbusters on YouTube. After class, Gary, Phoebe, and Podcast attempt to open the ghost trap. They accidentally let out the ghost that was caught inside, and through this discovery, Phoebe figures out that her grandfather was one of the Ghostbusters. Gary takes Phoebe and Podcast back to their grandfather's house, seeing it as a chance to spend some time with Callie. While they were there, Phoebe and Podcast dive into her grandfather's collection of old books, and they discover information about a deity named Gozer, who is referred to as the Gatekeeper and is described similarly to the creature they accidentally released from the ghost trap. In another part of town, Lucky asks Trevor to join her and her friends on a trip to the mountains, and during their outing, they experience the strange underground tremors firsthand, which leaves them frightened and confused. Phoebe discovers that her grandfather's secret lab beneath the ground, and it's revealed that her grandfather is Egon Spilger, one of the original Ghostbusters. Egon, even though he's no longer with them, somehow guides Phoebe in getting the Ghostbusters equipment up and running, and excited by their new project, Phoebe and Podcast decide to test out the Proton Pack, a ghost-catching device. Their testing leads them to a barn, and after hearing some odd sounds, inside they encounter a ghost they named Muncher, who had a particular diet of metal and can shoot metal pieces like bullets. When they try to catch Muncher, he escapes into town, prompting a wild chase. Meanwhile, Trevor has been working on fixing the Ghostbusters' iconic car, the Ecto-1, with guidance from his grandfather, Egon. Once the car was ready, Trevor jumps in and races off to help Phoebe and Podcast chase down Muncher in the town. In their chaotic attempt to catch Muncher, Phoebe, Podcast, and Trevor cause havoc across town with their ghost-catching beams accidentally damaging various properties. They succeed in trapping Muncher as he tries to escape to the mountains, but their victory is short-lived as they get arrested for the destruction that they've caused. Given the opportunity to make a phone call from jail, Phoebe decides to dial the Ghostbusters number that she received noted down. She reaches Ray's stand as one of the original Ghostbusters, and initially Ray was upset upon hearing Egon's name, but his anger softens when Phoebe reveals that Egon was their grandfather and that he had passed away. Ray shares the story of the Ghostbusters after their fight against Vigo, explaining how they eventually went their separate ways. He tells her Egon left for Somerville with their ghost-catching equipment, driven by his fears of an impending apocalypse. Ray admits that he didn't believe Egon's apocalyptic warnings, and Phoebe tries to convince Ray that the threat is real, but the call is abruptly ended by Lucky's father. Callie and Gary come to the police station to bail out Phoebe, Podcast, and Trevor. However, they find out that all of the equipment that they used to catch Muncher has been confiscated by the authorities. Supernatural activities escalate at the Shandon mines, and cracks appear on the walls. Gary walks into Walmart, freaked out by the marshmallows that come to life and invade the supermarket, and is then chased out by a dog-looking beast. Meanwhile, Phoebe, Lucky, Trevor, and Podcast investigate supernatural activities, which leads them to the mines. They uncover clues that lead them to believe that Egon was trying to prevent the return of a powerful deity, Gozer. While Phoebe and her friends were uncovering the truth at the mines, Egon's ghost guides Callie to the basement of their home, and there she finds a wall filled with notes and photos detailing her life, revealing to her that Egon, her father, had always been watching over her, contradicting her belief that he had abandoned her. This discovery is soon interrupted by a terrifying encounter with a shadowy beast that attacks her. As Phoebe, Lucky, Trevor, and Podcast return home, they find Callie now possessed by Zool, one of Gozer's minions, who turns aggressive toward them. In a different location, Gary works on the proton packs, unknowingly aiding Gozer's efforts to enter their world. The situation in Somerville worsens as earthquakes become more frequent and intense, signifying Gozer's impending arrival. Amidst the chaos, Callie, still under Zool's control, flees. Now, if you're liking the recap, go ahead and hit that like button, and if you're new around here, don't forget to subscribe for more cool recaps just like this one. So okay, let's dive back into the video. Digging deeper into the mystery, Phoebe discovers that her grandfather, Egon, had spent his final years preparing for Gozer's return. The farm itself is revealed to be an elaborate trap designed to stop Gozer. The young Ghostbusters suit up in Egon's basement, and Phoebe explains his grandfather's plan. Gozer's return is made possible by the formal reunion of her two guards and evil spirits, Zool and Vince, allowing Gozer to escape and ghosts to take over Somerville. The young Ghostbusters break into the police station to get their equipment, and Podcast had to release Muncher to help them get into the metal holding. Phoebe, Trevor, and Podcast head to the mountains to lure out Gozer, while Lucky heads to wait for them at the house. Gary and Callie turn into beasts and release Gozer and her minions, and Evo wakes up from his glass coffin to pledge allegiance to Gozer, but she kills him instantly. Phoebe distracts Gozer to give Podcast enough time to release her mother by trapping the beast, which weakens Gozer's physical form. Callie was confused about what was happening, and as they race back to the farm, they update her on what was happening back in town. Meanwhile, Gozer and Vince chase after the Ghostbusters to get back Zool. Phoebe lures Gozer to the trap field, but the capacitors malfunction, and Lucky tries to help hold Gozer in place, but she was not strong enough, and Trevor couldn't help since marshmallow ghosts were eating through the wires. Therefore, Gozer manages to free Zool and she possesses Lucky, and Gozer regains her physical form and powers. Gozer gets ready to finish off Phoebe and everyone else around, but Ray, Peter, and Winston arrive to help, but Gozer was too strong. Gozer approaches the knockdown Ghostbusters and gets ready to get her revenge when Phoebe faces up using her grandfather's proton pack, and Egon's ghost manifests and helps Phoebe hold Gozer in place. Seeing Phoebe courageously standing her ground, Peter, Winston, and Ray help her by crossing their proton streams, and meanwhile, Podcast finally removes the marshmallow ghosts, and Trevor uses his proton stream to charge the trap's power source. Callie then activates the ghost traps and sucks in Gozer and all her minions, stopping them from terrorizing Somerville once and for all. The elder Ghostbusters apologize to Egon's ghost for not believing in him and appreciate Phoebe for reaching out. Trevor frees Gary and Lucky from the beast's possession, while Podcast realizes that Ray listens to his podcast. Aragon reconciles with his family, including Callie, who runs into his arms before he passes on to the afterlife. In the final scene, the original Ghostbusters return to New York, and Peter is married to Diana Barrett, while Winston is a wealthy entrepreneur and a family man. At the family's beginning, the real estate agent is more than a friend to Egon, and she has a meeting with Winston, who is now a wealthy businessman. He mentions that he is covering the rent for Ray's bookshop and is optimistic that Ray will find his break soon. Winston fully restores Ecto-1 to the Ghostbusters firehouse, and a light on the Ecto containment unit starts flashing red in the basement. And this is how the movie comes to an end. If you liked our recap of Ghostbusters Afterlife, stick around for more recaps from earlier in the series coming soon. And while you're waiting, check out our recap of Poor Things. Do you have a movie in mind that you want us to recap? Leave us a comment, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.